I've just finished converting my van into a camper, and in this video I want to show you that anyone can do this, because a few months ago I had never even picked up a power tool. So I will go through the whole process from beginning and buying the van right through to all the finishing touches, and I'll also cover the costings of everything as well. Now, it's quite embarrassing that I'm 24 years old and I have never done anything like this before. I do very little DIY and building things. So it was quite a daunting idea that I was going to try and attempt to convert this van all on my own. But I did manage, and I think literally anyone can do this. Let's go right back to the beginning of this year when I started looking for vans to buy. You've got a few size options when looking for a van to convert into a camper. I see most people who want to live in their vehicle go for a rather large van, such as the VW Crafter or the Mercedes Sprinter, I believe. Now, these are great big things, and I didn't really fancy driving that around, especially as I want to be able to go down very small country roads and go through towns and it not be too much stress. So I wanted something a little bit smaller. I was really set on getting a transporter. It looked like the perfect sized vehicle. It wasn't too big, it wasn't too small, it looked really ideal. Although when I looked at the price for these things, they go for a crazy amount of money, and they are very, very popular for people who want to convert vans into campers. And then I started looking at VW Caddies, in particular the slightly longer version called the Caddy Maxi. I think it's only about 40 centimeters long, but it does kind of make quite a lot of difference. I was really set on getting one of these vans with the tailgate back door, because you can get barn doors, which are two doors that open, but I really wanted the tailgate. It would mean that I had a extra cover, so when it was raining I could shelter under it. And it's got this tailgate door, which is so ideal. I can just picture sleeping in this thing now. It's so much bigger. Oh man. I tried out a number of these vans and went to a few different garages, but realized that if I wanted something with low mileage and reasonably new, it would cost me about 17 to 20 grand, which really was way out of my price range. It's a tricky game, this van hunting. It's a lot of fun though, I have to say. Went for a test drive, super nice van, perfect for what I want to do. It just costs too much money. So I started looking for slightly older models. It was really hard to find one with the tailgate back door, but finally I did find one. We got another viewing on a cheaper van this time. You gonna sell me a van? Okay. Oh wow, it's so comfy. A 2016 VW Caddy Maxi. It had, I think, 114,000 miles on the clock, and it cost me £9,000, which, yes, is a crazy amount of money, but it was exactly what I wanted and exactly what I needed for this project. I just bought a van. That was the most nerve-wracking experience. Trying to barter. I'm not very good at it. I got a few £100s off though. Nice. Boy, that was exciting. My van is a 2-litre Startline model. Now, Startline is basically the basic model without all the luxuries such as cruise control and aircon. So my van doesn't have any of those things, but I thought, you know, I don't really need all those things. They're nice, but I wasn't really prepared to pay any more for a nicer van. Better get to work then. Once I got the van back home, I started to think about what I wanted to turn this thing into, and I thought I want to create something which is very simple, because I had never done anything like this before. I wanted to have something which I could camp in comfortably, so I wanted a bed. I also wanted to make the most of the storage, because the VW Caddy doesn't have a huge amount of room. It's not like one of these great big vans that is like living in a house. I needed to maximize storage, so I wanted to have a drawer that pulled out from underneath the bed, so the whole of the underside of the bed had storage space. I wanted some upper storage, and then also I needed a desk, because my job is making these videos and I want to be able to edit whilst traveling and on the road. So I needed a space where I could sit down and edit my videos. I also thought about the electrical setup, because of course if I want to edit my videos, then I need power. So the first proper piece of work I did on the van was actually stripping everything out. First screw removed from the van. I wanted to strip it all out to give me a blank canvas to work from, because currently the van had some ply walls, it had the bulkhead, which I wanted removed. So I spent about a day and a half just removing everything. This just involved like unscrewing screws, taking out the ply, taking out the bulkhead, and also taking out the roof. I did make one mistake, which was taking out, I think it's called the dust guard at the back, like where the door closes down onto, and I thought I needed to remove this. I didn't really know how to remove it, so I ended up pulling it. It snapped. Okay, we just decided to trash it. And then later on in the project, I realized I wanted it back in, and trying to find a new one was very tricky, trying to find that exact part, and it also was quite expensive. So I ended up not actually using that, but it is handy to have it. I shouldn't have just pulled it with brute force. I should have left it in there or used the screws. So yeah, just be careful when you're ripping things out, because you might need some of those things later on in the project. I was very reckless at this stage. Luckily there was no rust to deal with. This was a 2016 model and it looked like it had been treated pretty well. It almost looked brand new underneath the ply, and it was a very, very nice surprise to see that. I had been recommended by lots of people to sound deaden and insulate the van. Now the sound deadening is to stop the echoey sort of noise in the back, because a van is just a box of metal pretty much, and there's a lot of echoing, and the large metal panels can create a lot of noise when you're driving. If you hit on one of the panels, you can hear it echoing about and ringing. And to stop that, I bought some sound deadening pads, but they're basically just pads. I think they're made of butyl rubber, and I stuck them onto the side wall panels and the roof and the floor, and it basically just deadened the sound a lot. And I went for a drive before and after I added them, and it did make a lot of difference. This is something which I would definitely recommend you do, and it was 100% worth it, because driving a van around can be quite noisy on the road. So this is how the van sounds without sound deadening. And this is what it sounds like with sound deadening. I was very grateful for being able to hear my music over the sound of the van, because before I added it, it meant listening to music in my van was hard. I then started to insulate it. I used, I think it was 12mm closed cell foam, which is what most people seem to use. This was a similar thing. It had a peel back plastic material, and then you could just stick it to the surfaces. And I went over all the metal panels and stuck this on. Insulating means that the temperatures don't vary so much, which means you keep the van cooler in the day and also warmer in the night, which is what you want. And because of this smaller temperature difference between day and night, you also get less condensation and less moisture buildup on the metal panels of the van. Sound deadening and insulating probably took me 1.5 days. At this stage, I had to decide whether I would make any sort of adjustments to the outside of the vehicle, and whether I would do any screwing of holes from the outside to the inside, or whether I wanted a window or something like that, because you need to do this kind of early on in the project. The only thing that I actually wanted was a solar panel on the roof, and this would mean I had to have wires going from the solar panel on the roof down into the van. A friend of mine called Reese helped me prepare the van for fitting the solar panels. The way I fitted the solar panel was firstly by using some mounts. We did this by firstly sanding down the surface of the van where the mounts would be sticking to, and then using some degreaser to remove any oils or grease from where we wanted to stick the glue the mounts to. And then we applied some of this adhesive sealant called Sikaflex. I was very wary of how strong this stuff would actually be, especially when there's a solar panel on the roof and you're going 70 miles an hour and the air is going underneath it. I was thinking, is this really going to be strong enough? I can confirm, after quite a few times on the motorway now using it, that it is incredibly strong, and there is no need to worry about it not being strong enough. The mounts were stuck to the surface of the van, 2 holes were screwed in the ceiling of the van. All I then had to do was put my 250-watt solar panel on top of these mounts, and then I used self-tapping screws to go from the mount into the metal of the solar panel, and that held it in place perfectly. It was now time to do some woodwork, but at this point in the project I didn't own any tools to cut wood with. So I went to a tool shop and I bought a circular saw, a jigsaw and a sander. So the circular saw, the main use for that is to cut straight lines. And I would have to do a lot of these, long straight cuts. The jigsaw is for cutting curvy lines. It's the perfect tool for cutting a shape out of the wood. And the sander, well, that just sands down the wood and makes it nice and smooth. That was going to be used later on in the project when it was closer to finishing. The next few days consisted of me trying to learn how to use these new power tools. I was pretty scared to be holding something which has a blade spinning so fast, and I didn't exactly trust myself with these tools, but you get used to it after a while. You do something enough and it just feels kind of natural, and I did a lot of cutting over the next few days and weeks. Many cuts went badly, but slowly but surely I was improving, and I was getting more and more accurate as time went on. God, that was close. The main pieces of wood that I needed to cut for my van were firstly the wall panels. I wanted this van conversion to be as simple as possible, and I decided that I was gonna make it pretty much all out of ply. I went to a local timber yard and picked up a number of sheets of ply. These come in 2.4 meter by 1.8 meter sheets. I got some 9mm ply for like the wall panels. I got some 12mm ply for the floor, and then I got some 18mm ply for the bed and the desk area, because I wanted something quite thick for things that would take a lot of weight, like me lying down on it. The first bit of woodwork I did was cutting the wall panels. Now I thought it would be a simple case of just cutting a oblong piece of wood and fitting it to the wall, and there we go. But no, it actually was more frustrating and confusing than that, because a van, especially my one, isn't just square. You've got lots of little indents, you've got curves. The wall is curved like that as well as like that. So you can't just cut a square piece of wood out of the ply sheet. You have to actually measure it quite detailed. And the way I did this was make some templates. Making templates really helped with this. I used some cardboard. I could push the cardboard against the van, against the panel, and then kind of shape it into the shape that I needed. I could then cut the rough shape out of the cardboard or the paper, lay that down onto the ply, and then use the jigsaw to cut out the shape. However much time I did put into trying to make this as accurate as possible, it still isn't perfect. And yeah, doing the curved cuts are very tricky. Don't get too mad if you can't get them perfect, because it's not easy. Building the bed was quite a challenge, because I didn't just want to create a box. I wanted to have a pull-out drawer. So once I had cut 2 walls for the sides of my bed, and a front and a back, and also the inside drawer section, this whole thing involved just cutting a lot of straight lines. I cut the straight lines with the circular saw, and the way I got them kind of perfectly straight was by putting a straight edge. In my case it was a level. Clamped these down to the wood that I was cutting, and then you run the circular saw along it so it cuts a perfectly straight line. Use a guide. It's like using a track saw, but without the tracks. You just run it along the side of the straight edge, and I managed to get reasonably straight cuts. So once I had all the wood cut to size, I had to fix runners. I've never used runners before, but I picked up some, they're like 100 kilogram rated runners. I found them on eBay. I can't remember the exact ones I bought, but they cost me about £60, I think they were. These runners detach into 2 different sections. You screw one section to the drawer, one section to the carcass, in my case the bed, and then you can just slide the drawer into the bed. It took a bit of measuring to make sure the runners were flat and straight, But once they were in and I could slide the drawer in, it was so satisfying, and it kind of works perfectly. I made some wooden dividers that would help separate the drawer into different sections, and I simply just glued them in place. This wasn't a very neat job. I definitely could have done a better job of that. But it worked, and the wood glue that I was using is so strong and it holds it in place nicely. And then also, to finish off the drawer, on the front of it I had a little door handle. I picked one of these up from the local hardware store. I figured that when I drive the van, the drawer would open back, because there was a little gap between the end of the drawer and the boot of the van. So when I would accelerate in the van, the drawer would open and then crash against the door. So I needed to find a way to hold the drawer in place. And I got these door lock things. I don't know what they're called. Latches. A latch? Maybe it's called a latch. Anyway, I screwed this on, drilled a hole in the floor of the van so I can close up the drawer, turn the latch, push it into the floor so it doesn't go anywhere. This made a massive difference, and it means when I drive there is no rattling about the drawer and it doesn't open while I'm driving. So that was half of the bed. The other half, I was going to have a simple hinge door so I could keep stuff underneath the bed, and that was just pretty much the same thing. I just made a box, fit it into place, screwed in some hinges, and then this created the perfect place to store stuff. That's really cool. I like that. I also decided to put hinges on the other half of the bed so I could open up that from the inside, because I thought if I want to get to stuff while I'm on the inside of the van, I don't want to open up the back. I can also open it up from the inside. So I can access the whole bed and everything under it from inside, and then I can also access stuff on the end of the bed with the drawer when I'm on the outside. And all the stuff in the drawer was all my cooking stuff, because I wanted to be cooking outside the van. I didn't really want the inside of the van to get too oily and messy. So my plan was to keep all the cooking stuff in that drawer and then cook outside when possible. Next, I worked on the rest of the furniture. For my desk, I wanted this to be really strong, so I built some carcassing out of, I think it was 1 by 1 inch pine. I made a carcass, and then I put ply over the end and ply on the top. Underneath the desk, I put a fridge. I figured a fridge would be very handy because I was in a black van, and the black van would heat up a lot, especially on hot sunny days, and I needed to keep food cold. So that was one of my priorities. I needed to have a fridge. At this point I had pretty much the whole of the ground space taken up, but there was still a bit of space above. So above the desk I built some upper storage. This was done pretty much the same way. I made a little box out of carcassing material, 1 by 1. Made a frame, put some ply over the bottom and on the sides. This was probably the best decision I actually made because I store so much stuff in there. I put food in there. Let's have some crisps. Clothes in there, books in there, everything. It's great. The time came to fit the electrical equipment. Now this is where I completely broke down and didn't know what to do. I actually called an electrician and I got a guy called Lee to help me out, and I'm glad I did it because it was so confusing, all the stuff I had to fit. I'll quickly explain as simply as possible what all my electrical stuff does. So I have a battery. It's a 110 amp hour lithium ion battery. It's a lot lighter than lead acid batteries, but also quite a bit more expensive. But apparently they last longer and they are more efficient, and you can drain them down further, and they are better in general, so I'm hoping it will be worth the investment. I needed a way to charge up the battery. I wanted to be completely self-sufficient and off-grid. I didn't really want to be visiting campsites. So I have obviously the solar panel on the roof. The battery connects to this thing called a solar charge controller, and that basically, I think, converts the electricity created by the solar panel into electricity that I can use and that the battery can take in. It's a bit of necessary equipment that you need if you want to run a solar panel. Of course, a lot of the year there isn't much sun, and not every day it's sunny. So I had to have another way of charging the battery in case the sun didn't come out for a few days. And that's where I have this other little blue box called a DC to DC charger, or a battery to battery charger. This links up with the starter battery in the car, and it means that whilst my engine is running, once the starter battery of the car is filled, it will then switch to filling up my leisure battery. So all the time I'm driving, it is filling up the battery, which is great. If I'm on a long drive and it's raining and there's no sun, or I'm driving through the night, my battery is still being charged. And then when I'm not driving, hopefully I get some sun, and that will fill up the battery from the solar power. I didn't have a great deal of appliances that I wanted to run. I had a 12-volt fridge. This was a compressor fridge that is apparently quite efficient. It has a little freezer section inside as well. I had a couple of LED lights on the ceiling, a couple of USB ports, and also an inverter, which means I can convert 12-volt power into 240-volt power, which means I can charge my laptop and other things which use a 3-pin plug socket. It's just my laptop really, and also occasionally camera batteries. So Lee the electrician did pretty much all of the wiring. I then had a task, a very small task, but it felt like a big one, of just wiring the lights together and fitting them with the switches. I don't understand. I sort of half know what I'm doing, but I know that there needs to be a circuit complete, and I know that I need to crimp these wires to these connectors, but really I don't know if it's going to work. So there's a circuit complete, I just need to put a fuse in. Oh my goodness, no way, I did something. The lights turn on. Very, very satisfying feeling, I have to say. All this electrical equipment is inside this little box. This goes underneath the seat, which is great because it's out the way, and yeah, you hardly even notice it's there. Because I made the bed square, it meant there was a gap between the wall and the bed. And there's obviously space there, which I want to, you know, roll over onto when I'm sleeping, because it will make the bed a little bit bigger. So I just made 3 pieces of wood. They were annoying to cut because I realized when I lift the bed up, the hinge means that it actually goes over. It means I couldn't make these pieces of wood that go in there right to the edge. But I did the best I could, and I've got 3 pieces. That one slots in there, this long one goes across here, and then I've got a little one which goes on the end. So that means that now the bed is bigger, which is pretty cool. I had all the electrical equipment working, the woodwork pretty much done. I then sanded down everything. I think it was a 180 grit sandpaper. Went over with the electric sander over pretty much everything, just so there was no chance of getting splinters. I didn't go crazy. I didn't sand it until it was super smooth, like smooth as skin, but enough so that I wouldn't get splinters, and enough so that it didn't, like, you'd feel really rough. And then I went over it with linseed oil. Now I don't know if this was the best I did, because now my van smells completely of linseed oil. Maybe you can find a type of oil which doesn't smell so much, or maybe it will soak into the wood over time and the smell won't be so strong. I mean, linseed oil isn't the worst smelling thing in the world, but it also doesn't smell great either. I just need to get some air fresheners, I think, and it'll be fine. The mattress I have in my van, I got custom made from a local place called Southern Foam. I just went there with the dimensions, and it took them about a week, and they had a mattress with a cover cut perfectly to size. I put it in there and it was just fitted in so nicely. It's a 4-inch mattress, really comfortable and does the job perfectly. In terms of bedding, I just have a couple of pillows and my normal duvet that I normally use in my bed. I think maybe for winter camping or when it's a bit colder, I'll have a nice warm sleeping bag instead. At this point I thought it's ready to go camping in, so I packed up the van and went out for a night in the van. Check it out, we got a camper in the back. So cool. I arrived at my camp spot, pulled out my drawer, started getting my cooking stuff ready, and then it rained, and I realized that there was a drip of water which hit one of the parts of the door and then splashed onto the inside of the van, and the rain came down so much that I needed to pack everything away and actually cook on the inside of the van. So I got a good test on that first night camping to see whether I could cook on the inside, which I realised worked, but it did also get very, very hot in there and it steamed up a lot. So I needed some sort of ventilation. After that night camping in the van, I learned a few other things. I realized I needed a bit more privacy. I wanted to have it so people couldn't peer in through the front of the van and watch me sleeping. And at the same time, I didn't want people looking through the tailgate into the van, because in the night, the tailgate window is actually tinted. But in the night when you've got the light on, you can still see in. I went on the internet the other day and found a company called Van X, and they make curtains for vans. And I got one specific for the VW Caddy Maxi that I've got. This is the one which is for the cab divider. So I've got this rail. This is going to attach to the roof somehow. And this slides into that thing. And that's how it's held up. So I'm gonna need to cut this down. Look at that, we've got a curtain. As you can see, it's now like a little button which holds it in place, which is really neat. We got curtains on the van and it's starting to look like a house. I'm going to fit some curtains for this tailgate window as well. They are a very similar thing to the other curtains, same company, same sort of deal. And lastly, I've got some wind deflectors for the front two windows of the van. These are wind deflectors and they deflect wind, and it means that I can have my windows down and no rain gets in. So these are rain deflectors as well. And these fit on the window somehow. So I watched a guy on YouTube called Will Evans and he did this. I'm gonna try and make it look as easy as he did. These peel off. That slides in. That's cool, isn't it? That was very easy. You get a few of these. I think they help it stay in place or something. And they slide up in between. What have I done? So you get this clip thing and a screwdriver and push it up inside. Windows go up. I don't know how easy it is to see, but I can have the windows down like that now and no water gets in, which means the van has more ventilation, which means there's less chance of condensation and it getting too moisture filled in there. You wouldn't even know there's a camper in the back. And then, ta-da! There is. With the curtains fitted and the wind deflectors in place, I think I'm ready now and I've got everything I need to go on a proper road trip in the van. I will quickly give you a rundown of the costings for everything. I spent £9,000 on the van, £1,500 on electrical equipment, £1,150 on tools. This includes also things like screws and workbenches and all those sorts of things. £409 on wood, £140 on the mattress and the cover, £150 on curtains and the wind deflectors. So the van cost me £9,000. The conversion cost me £3,349, and I'm quite happy with that. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's a lot cheaper than it would have cost if I got someone else to do it professionally. Although if I did get someone else to do it professionally, it would have been probably a much better job. But it feels good, you know, I did it myself and I saved some money. Out of that £3,349 on the conversion, about £1,000 of that was on tools and about 2,300 of that was on the actual build, so the materials. So there is my van conversion from start to finish. I bought the van in March and it is now beginning of September. So March, April, May, June, 7 months it took me from buying the van to completing the conversion. But I would say, if I looked at exactly how many days I spent working on the van, I would say it's probably more like 1 month in total. So I finished the van and then took it on a crazy 2-month road trip around Europe, and it was the best thing I've ever done. Click one of the videos on screen now to watch the videos from my road trip. Thanks for watching everyone, I'll see you soon.